Yes, me again. It's because I'm cheap. Low cost is what I mean to say. I'm low cost. That's why Peter's got me back again. Just to scene set a little bit before we get into interrogating the panelists, and please do be ready to interrogate them. No expense has been spared to get the likes of Patrick Murphy here, so make him work for his money. Let me just scene set a little bit with a couple of slides. I'll go quickly so that we can get to the panelists. Just a little bit of background on us. We work on low-cost airline startups all over the world. Doesn't make us experts, but we've learned a few things along the way, and hopefully we can bring some of that out today. Now this curve, we've seen this a couple of times through the last couple of days, but I wanted to put this up again because it starts to open up the discussion on the Japanese market. So just to again remind you, if you're not familiar with this curve, what it's about is the trips, the number of trips per capita versus GDP per capita on the bottom. And what's interesting is look at Japan. As we know, very, very high GDP per capita, right over there on the right, but just under 1 trip per capita per annum. So the average Japanese is traveling just a little bit less than once a year by airplane. Now this is 2010 data. I'm not sure there's any more recent data, but for me this just illustrates very clearly that fares in Japan are very, very high, and that has fundamentally limited air travel in Japan, even though Japan has some of the biggest air markets in the world. So it's going to be quite interesting as the low-cost carriers really get established in Japan to see how this, where Japan is on this curve, to see how Japan moves. And as we heard yesterday from some of the LCCs, they've been operating, Peach has been operating, I think 6 or 7 months now, and they're getting load factors in the consistent sort of 85, 90% level. So that says lots of people are trying and using these LCCs and probably starting to come back. And maybe this is going to, this is an indication that those trips per capita in Japan is fundamentally going to move up. So let's just see maybe by the next conference. And here's just a little bit more detail on some of the fares. I've used some excellent numbers again from CAPA here. Now this is taking fares and measuring them on a unit basis. So it's fare per ASK. So it takes a little bit of thinking about. But what you need to do here is to put those fares or revenue per ASK in, look at cost per ASK. Now, a low-cost airline is typically achieving a cost per ASK of something in the region of 5 to 7.5 cents. That's really the benchmark. You know, the best ones are doing a little bit better than that, but that's really the benchmark. So take that 5 to 7.5 cents per ASK and look at those routes. Many of them are in very high, in high double digits, and this is why the Japanese market is so attractive to low-cost carriers. Here's an Airbus slide which shows, gives another perspective on this. LCC penetration in Japan is just so very, very low, and Peter's really touched on it already. That's effectively skymark, because again, this data I think is last year's data, but again it shows the sheer opportunity in Japan, which those LCCs are really going after. It also, by the way, shows the opportunity in Russia and China, but that's for another panel, I think, maybe to discuss, and in Indonesia, of course. So let's just turn again to liberalisation. We've touched on this a few times, but a little bit more data here. Japan has moved from being a very illiberal in terms of air services agreements to now being highly liberal, you know, in that it signed a lot of open skies agreements, 16 in all, and that's with all the principal region countries in the region. So take your pick, with China being the one exception, and as we understand there's some complexities going on there. But that's not just countries in the region, that's also the major long-haul countries such as the USA and the UK. And these open skies agreements account for just over 2/3 of Japanese passengers to and from Japan. So Peter's used the term a couple of times of almost like a revolution in the Japanese aviation market, and I think that's an indication of that. Many of these open skies agreements, most of the provisions, come into effect in March 2013. And what's been going on here is that the liberalisation, the timetable for liberalisation has been running in parallel with expansion of both Narita and Haneda airports. So I think when we get to 2013, 2014, we're going to see some much more open airports. We're going to see the low-cost carriers having a lot of aircraft. At the moment, they've only got 3 or 4 aircraft each. You know, a lot of aircraft. So fares in Japan and in the region should change quite dramatically, and the opportunities for travel should change quite dramatically. Now, why is Japan, if you weren't aware, why is Japan suddenly, perhaps, or maybe it's actually taken place over a few years, but why have they shifted from, you know, very restrictive aviation agreements to really opening up their market? It's really about tourism. Japan has had a long-term strategy of fundamentally increasing the number of tourists into Japan, and they see this as a means of growing jobs, increased income to the country, but also it's trying to address the disparity between people coming for holidays in Japan versus Japanese going abroad for holidays. And this really comes out in this chart here when we look at China, because of course with China's the nearest major market to Japan. You can see there's a huge difference between Japanese travellers and out to China versus those coming in. So this is really what's going on here. The Japanese government are determined to increase the travel into Japan, and frankly they've lost patience with ANA and JAL, the high fares of ANA and JAL. They've lost patience. They've seen those high fares as restricting travel, particularly inbound from countries with less, where people have less disposable income. And that's really at the heart of why this liberalisation has taken place. And of course the LCCs have stepped in there, they're aggressively building up services, and as we've seen, CAPA have already estimated as LCCs build up their services and the number of aircraft in their fleet build up, we should see LCC share in Japan grow dramatically, really, from a sort of 4 or 5% level up to 20%. And indeed, I think CAPA CAPA had gone out on a limb a little bit and said that maybe by 2020, LCCs could account for as much as 50% of air traffic into and between Japan. Now, if that's the case, that's going to have a huge impact on ANA and JAL, both very, very fine companies, but companies that have some of the highest costs in the world, highest unit costs in the world. And whilst they have aggressive cost-cutting plans in place, one of the questions has to be, are they cutting costs fast enough for the changes that are going on at the moment? So some very, very interesting things going on in the market there. But that's just the introductory slides. Let me just get the panelists up if they'd come to care to come and join me on the stage. Right, so we've got all the Japanese LCCs represented here. I think this is a great opportunity to really find out how they're going to be competing with each other. We've got Patrick Murphy, who's representing Peach. Can you just put the slide back up? And Patrick, Patrick has already been up, a couple of times. And then we've got
Zaman.
Okay, yes. I was going to mispronounce your name. Excuse me for that. And then.
For now you can call me Zaman-san.
Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. And then also from Jetstar. Welcome. Okay, so let's just sort of get started. I just want to quickly just show you one more slide, which is that we've got a little bit of information on the LCC impact on the market looking at Peach, because we're starting to see some data come out. And what's clearly happening from the data is that ANA would look to be cutting back on some services at Kansai, which is very interesting. I'd just like to ask the panel, do you think that this is a trend that's going to continue? Are we going to see ANA, JAL perhaps step back from some more marginal services out of Narita, out of Kansai, that quite possibly they've not been making any money on? What do you think?
Well, just stepping back in terms of Jetstar and how it was formed, obviously JAL had a lot of consternation around cannibalization, what it was going to do to its customer base. And it took 4 years to do the joint venture with them and the two other shareholders. But ultimately, they were reassured by the experience Qantas had with Jetstar in Australia, where in fact they actually flew the same routes, but managed to increase overall the joint market share that they had in some of the most lucrative routes like Sydney and Melbourne. So, they now see us not so much as a kind of an inevitable threat, but as a strategic kind of play. Like Qantas and Jetstar in Australia, we have joint flying committees regularly, and that has been a key to Qantas and Jetstar's success in terms of dual branding, and we will try and replicate that somehow. So to answer your question, we want JAL to see us as a partner that could actually help them look at routes and rationalize them in some markets, and perhaps free them up to open up more lucrative, perhaps long-haul international markets.
Can you see, just building on that, I was taking a city pair, Tokyo to Fukuoka, okay? And JAL and ANA fly something like 17 or 18 services between Haneda and Fukuoka, but and that's with 777s, in some cases 747s on ANA side. Whereas on the Narita side, they're flying 3 or 4 services a day, usually with 737 size aircraft. That rather says to me that logic says ANA JAL maybe pull back to Haneda and just get the feed into their Narita long-haul routes from Jetstar, from AirAsia. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, business travelers want to go from the center of the city to the center of the city in Fukuoka. Fukuoka, the airport is in the city, so it's easy, but, they want to fly from Haneda to minimize the amount of travel time, maybe to a day trip, a business trip. Whereas, when the same traveler is perhaps taking his family to Fukuoka, he'll think twice about, the cost of taking a family of 4 on JAL from Haneda and say, hey, Jetstar's a good option to take the family from Narita to Fukuoka. So certainly there's a fairly significant amount of thought behind the customer segmentation. And you're absolutely right. Narita is a bugger of an airport to get to from central Tokyo, but having said that, it's very convenient for people making connections. And I think in Japan they made a big error of having, dividing up Haneda and Narita in the early days, where they had Haneda as the domestic airport and Narita as the international airport, and you have to travel 3 hours between the two. Pity the poor traveller from Australia or the States who thinks Narita and Haneda are next door to each other, and they can just connect and go to Sapporo. So, they've actually redressed that balance, and I think it's a means of customer segmentation, and it's a means of convenience for the type of usage, and, like the connectivity that you just mentioned.
Well, Zaman, that's a great point, because just to draw on something Suzuki-san said, obviously AirAsia's operation is split, as it were. AirAsia X into Haneda and AirAsia Japan into Narita. Any sort of connecting opportunity there? How are you going to do it? And wouldn't it be more logical if when Haneda opens up, wouldn't it be more logical to just shift to Haneda?
We have plans in place to actually build an airport in Roppongi. No, don't quote me on that, no. I'm glad Azran actually mentioned it just now, and it's really the attraction of Narita. If day slots are available there, definitely they will actually have X coming in. But I'd like to actually build on your point just now. Narita is actually a painful airport. It is. It's difficult to get to. It's an airport where they close at 2300 hours at night. Regardless of whether you arrive a little late or not, they'll ask you to divert. They actually don't even allow passengers to even hang around in the terminal. The parking lot's closed, and if you were a passenger taking the first flight out on Jetstar or even as a SkyMart, that passenger literally has to wait outside of the airport until it opens at 6 a.m. And so these kind of things actually forbid the low-cost traveler actually coming to Narita. Is not very attractive. So I'll start with that. Now, saying which, Haneda would be great. It's a nice airport. It's closer to Tokyo. Problem is slots. There's just no more slots available. So the day will come.
But that changes next year. Wouldn't it be good to shift the AirAsia operation for all the reasons you've given to Haneda, and then you've got a great competitive advantage against Jetstar? I mean, who am I to give you this idea? But it's.
I'll write that note down right now. No, but yes, Haneda would be great. This is a limitation of slots. Only the night slots are available now in Haneda. And even if they were to give any, I'd like to be able to see them by next year, 13. How will they give up those daytime slots and manage it better? Because if you arrive at Haneda at 11:30 at night, which is now, you're going to get nowhere. For me personally, when I landed at 11:30, I literally have to take the AirAsia bus with the tech crew, stay in Asakusa at the center of Tokyo, spend one night, and then take the train the next morning up to Narita. It's really inconvenient. So we've got to think about opening those slots during the day.
I mean, one thing in favour of Narita versus Haneda, and I completely agree with all the comments that, Narita, the curfew's got to be lifted, the congestion's got to be better, the access outside of normal hours is dreadful. I completely agree with that. But one thing that Narita's cottoned on to is, its future depends on LCCs using it. So they have actually put together a budget and committed to building an LCC-only terminal of 2015. And I think, we've already kind of put our hands up and said, please help us design this now. Let us get it early. Because we know how LCCs, airports like in the Gold Coast run very, very well. So, they have actually put their hand on their hearts and said, okay, we know you're the future. We'll build something for you, hopefully, which is significantly cheaper.
What's the cost estimate for the low-cost terminal? $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion?
I can't really say.
Well, because it's a serious point, because this is sometimes Japan's Achilles heel, over-engineering the ground facilities. And Patrick, you mentioned yesterday that you're very excited about the low-cost terminal opening in Kansai. Tell us about that. Low cost, truly low cost, in the right location, going to work?
First of all, Kansai is
Kansai,
Tokyo, right?
Yeah.
So from what you've heard, that's one of the reasons why we're not in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Kansai, which has got its own popular appeal in terms of population base of 20 million, over 20 million. All the centres of major industries are in that region. All the tourism centres are in that region. So you've got good reason to make it work in its own right. But also, Kansai, as we know, was one of the major pork barrel people described earlier. But now they are commercial. Now they talk business. Now they do deals, including building a low-cost terminal, specifically for the purpose. Because Kansai is a magnificent airport for all kinds of businesses. But the Tokyo is suited for the low-cost coming in, fast turnaround, and all of that. Right now, we operate not out of the main terminal, but out of a separate operation that bus people out to and from the aircraft where they are. The new terminal will be operating on October 28th. It doesn't matter what it costs, it's what we pay. Is what matters, right? And we would pay less than we would pay operating into the main terminal. That's the critical aspect of it. And we're pretty certain that nobody else is going to be able to undercut us on the cost of the airport operation. But we will be able to bring the aircraft right up to the gate. There will be no jet lag, there will be no delays. If we could get passengers off the rear doors and on the front doors, we do so, but that won't be possible. But we will be able to do the fast turnarounds and do what we want to at that low-cost terminal.
That's key, isn't it? And Suzuki-san, if I could come back to you, as Jetstar's announced, obviously Osaka as its second base, are you going to be in the low-cost terminal or the main terminal?
That's the sole point. We won't be in the low-cost terminal because, it's not expandable beyond what they've originally designed. Having said that, for all the points that Patrick made, it's absolutely crucial that we have a presence in Kansai. It's a huge catchment area. And together with Narita, it's an international airport where a lot of customers of ours arrive at from Southeast Asia and also places like Australia. So it's an important hub and it's also an important inbound and outbound centre. Also, the rate of expansion that we're planning, we already have 24 aircraft on order. And within 2.5 years, we will be a 24 aircraft operation. We're currently a 4 aircraft operation. From next week, we're actually a 5 aircraft operation. And we can't keep them all at Narita. That's the reality. So, we do have to disperse our bases. Kansai will not be the last base in Japan. We will have multiple. And that will give us more flexibility in terms of curfews and, operating issues and so on. So it's very important. But to come back to your question, I was speaking with Ando-san, the CEO of Kansai International last week, and he would like to build us more LCC terminal capacity. So, they also understand that for their future, LCC is very important. Another interesting point is that we started from, the first week of operation with a Narita-Kansai route. Now, I think one of the speakers yesterday talked about Tokyo to Osaka, it's always going to be the Shinkansen, always going to be the bullet train. I believe that too. As a traveller, I thought I'd only want to travel on the train from Tokyo to Osaka. You go city to city, and there's a train every 10 minutes, and it's on the dot. However, we decided to do the Tokyo-Osaka route almost as a ferry flight because we have Osaka originating routes, and we need to get the plane there somehow, even if there's no passengers on it. What surprised me is that because because the price is right, the load factor has been, very, very good in the 80s for that route, which everyone said only the trains could win.
Well, Patrick, this is perhaps a difficult question to answer, but Peach is obviously the first low-cost carrier in Osaka Kansai, but it's now going to face some very stiff competition from Jetstar, who are going to be using the main terminal. Now, for those of us who know the Osaka airport, the main terminal is a very convenient step off the train, whereas the low-cost terminal is going to be a little bit further away. Does this mean Peach is going to be cheaper than Jetstar to help alleviate that difference?
Price isn't a function of the cost itself. Price is going to be set by the competitive forces, right? We will not be undercut by Jetstar, right? We will be the same price. For the convenience, you get off the train in Kansai, you walk onto the bus, and the bus takes you to the low-cost terminal instantly, all the time. So there's no inconvenience. In fact, some advantage that you may not have to walk to those operations. And then you're moving into a facility that's perfect for the operation. And from an airline operation point of view, we will have an advantage. For example, it takes 7 minutes to work a jetway, to bring an airplane in, to get it, push it away, and everything else, right? If we go into the main terminal, we'll see how Jetstar do it, but that was impossible for us when we started on the 1st of March. We would not go in there, and we made this arrangement with an alternative facility whereby we take people by bus. So we use the other side, we do not use the main terminal. We use the hotel site as our check-in, and we bus people out to the aircraft. So we couldn't take the time, we couldn't afford the time, and we couldn't afford the cost associated with it, because they wouldn't discriminate on the cost. We would have to say that the state would pay the same amount that JAL would pay for the 777 operating there. But by going to the low-cost terminal and doing this in an interim arrangement, we have kept our costs significantly lower. And I'd like to think that that's the way it was made. We'll always have that. But when it comes to the fares and the prices, I think they'll be set by reference to competition, not necessarily by total cost. There are other factors than price coming into the equation. That's where our competitive advantage will play.
Well, this leads me to a question. I'm a simple traveller, based. I sometimes live in Tokyo or I live in Osaka. Just to make this this question easy. Why am I going to choose Peach ahead of Jetstar or AirAsia? Or why am I going to choose Jetstar ahead of AirAsia or Peach? What's the differentiating factor? For me, the man in the street, who's a simple person, doesn't know anything about airlines. They're all A320s, they're all got sexy cabin crew, the schedules are going to be good, the meals are going to be good. Why am I going to choose your airline? Let's hear the thing that the man in the street's going to go away with thinking, I'm going to choose Jetstar or AirAsia for this reason.
Okay, Jetstar, the brand, is very well known in Japan. Jetstar Group Airlines, whether it's the Australian airline or the Southeast Asian airline, have been flying into Japan for 5 years, more than 5 years. And already, 2.5 million Japanese have flown Jetstar. So there's a familiarity. The other thing which we say from a kind of sales and marketing point of view is that we have a price beat guarantee. That means that if you can find for the same route on the same day, similar type of hours, a fare that is cheaper than ours, you can come back to us and say, look, your advertised fare is higher, and we'll give you a 10% guaranteed discount off the competitive fare, which they're saying is cheaper for that route. So, it's a marketing promise that we make, and it's quite effective. It means people say, oh, well, let's have a look at Jetstar, just in case. So they'll go to a site. And I think, ultimately, for people that want to go from the regions overseas, or people wanting to come in from overseas to the regions in Japan, the fact that we already fly to 60 destinations in 17 countries in Asia Pacific is a big plus. So connecting passengers, it's the ease, it's the kind of consistency of service, and that is also an attraction.
Well, Zaman, that's pretty compelling. I'm now booked in my mind on Jetstar. Persuade me I've made a mistake. persuade me I should be going on Jetstar.
You made a mistake.
Yeah, on AirAsia. Persuade me I made a mistake. I should be switching to AirAsia. This is why it's better.
It's only been a month since AirAsia started out of Narita, AirAsia Japan, and we'll find that up to a quarter and up to 30% of our passengers are actually non-Japanese. So they're probably actually Australians, they're probably actually foreigners from Europe, and actually Malaysians as well. And and then we asked them, obviously they've heard of AirAsia from the outside. The remaining 70% are actually just by pure luck. I mentioned yesterday, a lot of them are the older demographics. So it's very surprising to us that there are 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds who are actually traveling with us. But there's a large bunch of university students, and we said, why try us? And they said, just want to try something new. So kind of get the sense that, it is about the brand presence is very important. But then again, if AirAsia doesn't have a brand presence in Japan as strong as any of the other airlines, why did they choose? We just did a very quick survey, and amongst the young ones, we market fun and sexy, as like the other airlines do as well, right? And we think that could be one pulling factor. After 1 month, probably I can say that for the forward months, let's see how busy it gets you in December. But I'm going to say the only reason you want to is because you want to meet our sexy flight attendants. Probably a bit sexier than the Jetstar ones and the Peach ones, most probably.
Now, you have only been flying 1 month. Sorry, I'll come to you in a second, Patrick, if I may, just to ask you a question. But how soon before you're in Kansai as well?
When they drop the airport rates and everything.
So the costs are too expensive. The costs that Peach and Jetstar have accepted.
Innovative models. We'll put it this way: us entering into Japan, we've asked a lot of questions. We said, look, we run low-cost airlines in other regions of ASEAN in this manner. Okay, we do 25-minute turnarounds, we do this and that. And then the minute we come to Japan, and then we come and ask, can we do the similar things? The first answer that comes back says no, you see. So it's very much a tug of war of accepting, yes, the JCAB, the governing body will always say, no, you cannot actually do it this way. So it's about finding that innovative model that you can. Where we open up a second or third base really will come probably by next year. Let's take a look at where that will be. But we will look at other bases. Kansai is not in the picture for now.
Now, Patrick, we've got two very fine brands here, very well organised, executed airlines. How's Peach going to be better to the man in the street? I don't want airy-fairy airline stuff that the man in the street doesn't understand.
We're all going to be operating safe airlines with
Yeah.
pedigree and background that gives people the comfort and assurance that this is maybe low price, but it's not cheap at the expense of safety. Number two, we're all going to be pricing the same because we're in a competitive world. That's the nature of it, nothing to do with your cost base or anything else. But you've got to get your low fares simply by having low cost. And again, the secret to Kansai is utilization. It's a 24-hour airport. We never have a delay. We get the best service. We can come in at any time. We have connections downtown. All of those features are already provided. And from Peach, we have a low-cost terminal. We have a facility that does not have to defer those high costs at the main terminal. But more critically, and number three, the real reason why people will go with Peach is because we're going to have a Japanese quality. With a pure Japanese. You will see it in the sense of the beauty of the operation, the flight, the cabin attendants, and all of that will come through. The cleanliness, the efficiency, the way things are done, it's pure Japanese. That's what's going to make it appealing.
Explain that for me. I'm an ignorant gaijin. I don't know very much. What's that Japanese quality mean to me, the man or woman in the street? What does it mean?
Right. It's like products and services, the shirts or the products that you buy. It's you're creating a brand and you're creating an image. May I do a demonstration? Everybody knows AirAsia and everyone knows Jetstar, right? I'd like you to just have a look at Peach. Can we put up a slide? That's the aircraft. It's bright and appealing type of aircraft. It's distinctive, it's different than everything else. It's cute, it's cool, it's what things want. It's totally different. We have the next one.
So you're going to catch us out, aren't you? You're going to take the opportunity to be on this, like this and advertise the brand.
Can you put up the AirAsia slides, please?
Let's just have a look at the terminal.
Yeah.
The next one. that's the independent terminal that's operating there. Those are the kind of things where we'll be able to deliver quality and service. And that's what we have to do. And there's a certain uniqueness about Kansai and the region and the people that I think we'll be able to exploit. But more critically, that is our focus, Kansai to start. But like we always do, we too, we'll be looking at alternative bases. But we have to build the brand, build the image, and get that service standard across through the way we do it, both on the ground and in the air. I'm pretty sure we can do it. But the main feature is we're not Asian, and we're not Australian, we are Japanese.
Well, let me give the audience a chance to ask some questions. Anybody got some immediate questions? Professor.
Okay. You talked a lot about Tokyo, Osaka, Kansai. You talk about a lot about Osaka and Kansai and Narita. What about Fukuoka and Sapporo, which are the main, very large, high-density routes? Can you talk about a little bit how you are squaring up there with Japan Airlines and ANA? Okay, thank you.
Well, certainly, Fukuoka and Sapporo are very, very important routes for Jetstar Japan, both out of Narita and Kansai. A huge amount of demand for those routes. One of the things that we're seeing is that, people, again, it comes back to propensity to travel. Sapporo especially, because it's quite a long distance away and it's on another island, train is not such an easy alternative. People just give up. They kind of say, okay, my family lives in Sapporo, I work in Tokyo, I have a tradition of going to see my family once a year. Now they're actually saying, I'll go 4, maybe 6 times per year to visit my family because it's that cheap. And it really, really, really is a factor of price. We did just a comparison before we launched of how expensive the Tokyo-Sapporo route was on just a normal day in October last year. And a one-way ticket on average was 35,000 yen on one of the legacy airlines. A similar distance, Sydney-Melbourne, was the equivalent of about 10,000 yen. Similar distance. So it really is that price is the gating factor. And these routes are already very, very, very highly traveled. They're going to be significantly more highly traveled with the entry, not just of us, but of AirAsia and also of Peach.
Could I add on to that? It was only 2 weeks, sorry, I apologize. I was actually in Narita 2 weeks ago, and the route to Sapporo in the morning, that first flight, it was very early. There were a group of 16 school kids, and they were all in their football uniforms, and I was asking, I said, wow, this is great, where are you going? We're actually going to play a football match for the day, and they're going to catch a flight back in the evening. And I told this to my Japanese colleagues, and they said they've never seen that before. They've never seen the enabling of a passenger, school kids going out for a football match, come back on the same day, because all the costs are a lot better. So I agree with you, those fares right now just enable, and never in any way cannibalizing the ANA JAL customer, but just creating our new markets. Kids going to play football in Sapporo and come back during the same day. I've actually seen that.
Patrick, you're going to make a point?
Well, obviously, price is the driving force. You have to put this in perspective, that today we are, or will be all charging much the same price, but it's less than half of what the established carriers are currently doing. It's less than the Shinkansen, where the Shinkansen is the competitor, for example, with local. The Shinkansen is an alternative, but these prices are less than that, and in fact they're at the level of the cheap buses. And if you want to do the reference back to Europe, that's what generated the traffic. It was the low prices that brought new people into the market. People that couldn't afford to travel. People that could now, first time, contemplate doing the travel. And that's what we're creating. So it's not a case of taking it away from the established carriers, not even taking it away from the train necessarily. We're generating a total new market. Sapporo is just on Kansai. We're at 4 a day, we're moving up to 5 a day. It's the scale of operation within the first 6 months. It's that level of business, and it's operating at 85% load factor.
Well, this leads to the next question, really. I mean, again, I want to answer this a bit carefully because I realise you can't say too much, but all of you have talked about some, publicly, some very good load factors. But the key question, what goes with that, is the yield. I mean, some of the headline fares are obviously very low, and we know that's a limited number of seats. So, how's the average yield coming out? How are costs coming out? Is this load factor, is it profitable? Or, if not profitable yet, is it going in the right direction? Are you doing better than budget?
Expensive. Operating in Japan is expensive.
Yeah.
CASK is expensive. I mean, I won't be able to share any numbers here, but in any case, it's probably taken back AirAsia a little bit because, we're used to operating in ASEAN, and we take a look and say, hey, look, the 3.5, the 4 cents is applicable. But looking at where Japan is, it is expensive. The direction that it is going is the only way is make sure load factors stay up, make sure you stay populated, make sure that your forward bookings are good enough. And the way that it is right now, we are a new brand. We're taking in last minute purchases very high right now, and they'll be paying higher fares. So we see that, and we think that can we actually now project ourselves 6 months ahead, and let's see how they respond. Collect the revenue, work on the cost basis, make sure let's work on Narita Airport together, and that's the only way we'll move forward.
Suzuki-san?
Where for the first 2 months, I can only share the load factor. The average has been 86%, it's been 90% during the August summer month. But way ahead of expectations and budget. And in terms of CASK, again, I can't share the exact number, but someone put up some numbers where we're within, well within. And also in terms of RASK, ahead of expectations. Where we've beaten expectations especially is the speed at which forward bookings have actually come in. So therefore we've been able to tighten inventory. And the other thing is ancillary. I was actually just not expecting any ancillary because these flights are 1 hour, 1.5 hours long. People are going to bring their food and drink on board. There's lots of shops at the airport. So I was just saying, no, not much ancillary there. But in fact, ancillary is way above where we expected it to be.
Very interesting. Patrick, you've got a longer track record to talk about.
6 months record, and yes, we had promotional fares and almost giveaway fares to CAPA. But frankly, our revenue per passenger has kept close to the budget level all through the whole process. The load factor has exceeded all of our expectations, so we've got the revenue positive. More critically, back to what Suzuki was saying, our ancillary revenues are 14% of our total revenue, right from the start. Now, we have done things with our fares. We have the Happy Fare and the Happy Plus Fare, because we recognize in the Japanese market you have to do something different, because you were selling through the trade and everything else. You couldn't just import the European model of the unbundled fare and then all add on to that. So you can now buy a Happy Plus Fare, which will include your baggage, which will include your seat. And that makes a big difference for a lot of people. But of course, for us, it's straight in, it's ancillary revenues. And the other feature, because of the local fares, is a phenomenon which we're well used to in Europe as well, the fees for change. Japanese want to change flights, names, dates, everything else, and we have a charge for a change. Except if you pay the whole Happy Plus Fare, there's no charge. But lots of people insist on changing, and they have to pay a charge, and that's a significant revenue flow, apart from baggage and leaves and all that.
I live in Japan. I live near Haneda, and what's very interesting is when I sit in my local izakaya. If you don't know what an izakaya is, it's a Japanese. The izakayas everywhere in Japan, but it's like a bar restaurant. They are talking. The customers are talking about the low fares of Peach and Jetstar and AirAsia. And I find that remarkable because we think about airlines all the time, but when a topic of conversation in the izakaya that keeps coming up is, how are those fares so cheap? That's really, for me, very indicative that the man in the street is picking up the message from these low-cost carriers, and he's thinking about it, and he's anxious to try. I'll come to you in a minute, if I may. There's a gentleman at the back who's got a question.
Yeah, in Cunningham, Macquarie. I was just interested in the views of the panel on a couple of topics. A is cannibalisation. Although you're talking about any market experience globally, for example, here it was on a lot of routes, the average cannibalisation rate was 20 to 40%. So I'd be interested in your views there. Secondly, in terms of the low-cost carrier terminals, you've got in Singapore, Changi Airport scrapping their LCC terminals. I'm interested in your views as to how in Japan the development of these is positive for your business. And just thirdly, the degree of independence you have from ANA and Japan Airlines respectively. Again, the experience around the world does show in some cases LCCs struggle with their legacy parents.
Okay, three good questions there. I'm just going to give one each to each of the individuals. Patrick, low-cost terminal, first of all, if you could answer that question, if you wouldn't mind.
Peach does not need any interline, any transfer passengers or any connections. We can operate at a low-cost terminal. If you have to interline, if you have to transfer, if you want to facilitate people going for different flights to another flight, that's a problem. That's why it's in Singapore. Has moved that particular way because there's too much traffic interline crossing from one side to another, and the separation of terminals doesn't work. I know we will have interline. We already have. On the first flight to Sapporo out of Kansai, there were 12 people arrived in Jetstar from Japan going to Sapporo. It does happen, but you have to take up your bag. You've got to walk to where you're going, and you've got to check in again. That's part of the low-cost format. We do not have any facilitation of doing that. So I think the terminal aspect is linked. But for Peach, a dedicated terminal at our main base makes sense. Remember, it's only that Kansai that have a dedicated terminal. We do not have it at Sapporo, at Chitose, or anywhere else, or even Hong Kong or anywhere else. We're still operating as the main terminal.
Okay. Suzuki-san, a cannibalisation point. A little early for you to see, but do you think there's a cannibalisation of JAL traffic by Jetstar?
To be honest, we don't see a significant amount.
Yeah.
You know, as I mentioned, you know, the Qantas Jetstar experience significantly put JAL's mind at rest in terms of we're just going to take all their customers. What we have seen is that we have common customers across the JAL group using Jetstar, but for different reasons. You know, if they're taking a large family, if they're taking a vacation, they'll choose Jetstar and put up with the inconvenience if necessary of going to Narita because, you know, they can buy 4 seats for the price of 1 in some cases. So I think overall the pie is increasing. You know, JAL see us as an interesting partner. They're also a supplier to us for some services like ground services. And we're pushing them hard to make themselves more efficient all the time. So they're learning from us as much as we're actually, you know, learning from them in terms of the how to navigate the labyrinth of Japanese regulations, etc. So at this stage, we don't see it as being a zero-sum game.
And so, Matt, lastly, you know, for AirAsia working with this traditional airline, ANA, very fine airline, but a very different culture, how's it going? Easy relationship?
They've given me a Japanese name. They've given me Okamura-san. He's the Japanese comedian. They say I actually look like him as well. So I don't really know Okamura 99. ANA has been a great partner so far, but you know what the difference is really made is, you know, on paper you'd say AirAsia working with ANA, a very traditional airline, you'd think it would be a nightmare. The important thing in this relationship has actually been driven from the top. From Ito-san himself, the President and CEO, he said he just wants a different brand and create a new business. So with that direction, it's been a bit difficult because it's a change of the mindset. We're working with ANA colleagues who've been in ANA for 30 years plus. So we're powering through it. So in return, last week, I made the whole the whole AirAsia Japan office, of which there were a lot of ANA people, I made them dance the Oppa Gangnam style. Have you heard of Oppa Gangnam craze from Korea? We had a party in the office, right? And it was a party where we were celebrating the first year inauguration. And it was very quiet. So I stood up and I said, "Where's the music?" And then they said, "Music, Zaman-san?" I said, "Yes, where's the music?" So I got up onto the screen, Oppa Gangnam. So we all did the Oppa Gangnam style dance. And it was amazing to see Suzuki-san and all these very traditional Japanese ladies and gentlemen. They were dancing with us. It was great. So, in short, it's been a journey and it will continue being a journey. It's a mindset change, and we'll power through.
Time's up, but I'd like to squeeze a couple of questions in, Peter. Can I do that? Okay, very, very quick. You first, really quick, and then you, if you would, sir.
Thank you. Marcel Grau from Bombardier. So as sexy as the Japanese market is, and I would say really because of the high yields, if we look, pre-LCC era, I think nobody could argue that domestic traffic in Japan has been on a slippery downward slope of about 2% for the last 10 years. Legacy carriers have been operating at about high 60% load factors in a declining market. And I think no one would argue that once LCCs start pouring into Japan, there's going to be a downward pressure on yields. Now, pre-LCC, the legacy carriers were able to afford a 69% load factor and get away with it profitably. But once the yields start undergoing pressure, how do you foresee the reaction of the legacy carriers domestically?
We'd like to
So first of all, I'd say, no, I agree with you. I mean, currently the total domestic and international passenger numbers for Japan is 89 million. It used to be above 105 not so long ago. The government wants to get it back up to 105 million in the next couple of years. So LCCs play a really important role. But what I said about the pricing is that, yes, overall, I think, the entrance of the LCCs will pressure prices downwards, but the pie will increase because people will think that flying is a normal part of life. Japanese people, by and large, do not think flying domestically, particularly, is a normal part of life. It's just not an option. So I think as the market and the number of users expands, the yields can afford to come down. And that's what the legacy carriers actually have to bank on. At the same time, they have to get a lot more efficient. JAL and ANA, I think, still have over, some of the highest CASKs of 13 to 14 yen, which, really needs to come down to about at least the Skymark level, which is 8 to 9 yen.
Any other comments?
I think what will happen in Japan is exactly what happened in Europe. There will be adjustments by the legacy carriers, and they will have to because they're forced by the circumstances to do it. But it won't inhibit the growth rate of the low-cost carriers. But there will be reduction in capacity by ANA and JAL on domestic routes or on the routes where the low-cost carriers are operating. But it won't be a massive replacement situation, it will be a reduction. In fact, ANA have already declared a 2% reduction in domestic capacity for winter 2012-2013.
Peter's kindly given us another 20 minutes. There's such a lot to talk about. I'm sorry, I had the wrong timings here. Sir, I think you had a question?
So I just had a very quick follow-on.
Sure.
You were saying you're going to be cutting capacity, but from previous engagements, we understand that they also do not want to cut frequency. So are you suggesting a down-gauging in aircraft size?
Absolutely. And a switch to alternative. We've already seen ANA switch to more international operations, obviously using the Dreamliner as the vehicle to bring down their costs in total, but focus on the international markets where there's no low-cost competition. That's much smarter for them to go ahead and do that. And I've no doubt JAL will do likewise.
I was going to say cheaper regional jets. Since you're from budget.
And I'd say also, a lot more code share and interline alliances to see if we can actually provide that route most efficiently.
Sir.
I'm Masato Takamatsu with Japan Tourism Marketing, and for the last day and a half, there were a lot of discussion about the opportunities and future of the LCCs in Japan. But I'm sure that you three have already faced a lot of challenges and issues to start your operation in Japan. And what can Japanese government or maybe the airport operators can do to support your future growth? Because I think this is very important for the entire Japanese economy, because this can be a big trigger for the growth of the entire economy by encouraging people to travel and move around and spend more money. So what can the government do? Or what do you expect the government to do?
An excellent question. Zaman, would you mind starting off on that?
I'll just say this, a greater understanding of how LCCs operate, understanding that a higher utilization of aircraft is critical to our operations, meaning quick turnaround times, meaning in and out is really important. And for that reason, bringing that quick turnaround time model to Japan has been difficult so far. So it'd be great if we can work together with authorities to let them understand what does it mean to do a 25-minute turnaround. It means that I can board passengers while refueling, because that's one of our big issues. We just cannot do it right now. So that's what I would say. Understanding the LCC model. High utilization aircraft is critical. They need to understand that.
Patrick, the key thing you want the Minister of Transport to have in his head.
Let's change the basis on which we hire pilots. Pilots. We are going into a shortage of pilots.
This is all the things, we're refueling with passengers on board, pilot certification. We're having a ridiculous situation. We're trying to hire a pilot with 8,000 hours of on-type experience, and he's still got to go through 24 hours of simulator trainings. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So, come into the real world. Airport costs, airport management, very archaic, very fragmented. Airport runways are managed by the government, and the airport facilities are managed by a private company. I've never seen a passenger who uses the airport runway that doesn't use the airport building. So, you just need to have a holistic approach. It can be win-win. We can bring more passengers to the airports. That's how they make money. They have to start seeing us as true customers.
But there's a disconnect, isn't there? There's this Japanese tourism strategy which is so important to the country, and yet what the LCCs are saying, it's still hard work to operate in Japan. And just because that liberalisation has started doesn't mean that it's finished. There's a long way to go, I think. And other questions? You had a question, sir, just here.
Quick question from a distribution point of view. We talk about the importance of our, online or to market through web or mobile, and then also, the having aware of that the importance of a travel agency in Japan. They have significant market shares in terms of distribution. So, how do you guys differentiate using those two resources? One is the travel agencies, and also the online distribution.
Yes, a good question, and allow me to slightly preface it by who's on GDS here? You're on GDS? So you're not. Okay, so we've got a difference in approach here. Let's, having established that, Suzuki-san, would you mind starting off?
Well, Jetstar Japan, obviously, web is a key LCC channel and a low-cost channel to access customers. But, quite early on, we decided in Japan that we need to have as many touch points as possible because, as you pointed out, for instance, JTB, you need JTB on your side. We don't want them as an enemy. So we have deals with traditional agencies like JTB and HIS to distribute our product. But the vast majority of our bookings at the moment, about 90%, come through web, so direct channels. And we have the rest coming through call center, convenience stores, etc. So I think, how we differentiate, the agencies do a very good job on a number of issues. For instance, if we've got quiet periods where, the forward bookings are not so brisk, we'll go to the agents, work with them, and they'll come up with some fantastic package deals. Japanese love packages. They like somebody to recommend something for them, the total thing instead of door to door. So that is actually a good strategy for filling up seats that are not filling up as quickly as we'd like them to.
And how are you avoiding the costs of GDS and working with agents?
Well, I mean, you can't really avoid the cost. The costs are what they are. Obviously, we try and negotiate the best deals possible. But it is a question of the market, the target market size. You significantly increase your accessibility to, say, old age pensioners if you go through the travel agents. And they are, more, they do have certain propensity to travel on off-peak days, for instance, which is, a win-win situation for us. So the little bit that you might give up on margin, you're actually getting in terms of load factor. So those are the kinds of balancing strategies we're always thinking about.
Zaman?
I said this today, web bookings is still very heavy, understanding the mobile market, and just look at the Japanese customer. They sit on trains the whole day, going back and forth to work. They're on their mobile phones non-stop, and that's going to be a very large channel for us as well. But understanding that not only working with travel agents, so another method would be going to work with an online travel agency, OTA, and in our case it would be Expedia. So we're trying now to package deals together, and that hasn't actually brought a lot of fruits yet, but we still believe that's the way to go. So OTA and still direct to the customer.
But Zaman, let me just ask you, I'm still only at the beginning of learning about Japan, but in my observation, the Japanese customer is still quite cautious about online, payments.
I'm glad you asked.
How are you addressing that side of it?
We have a call center set up, and 60% of the calls coming in now are asking simple questions like, who are you? Are you a real airline? Do you have real planes? Does AirAsia, we've had some profound questions. Do you take off and land as everybody else? So you're right, the awareness of who an LCC is, a lot of work needs to be done there. But that comes back down to trust, correct? So yesterday we saw that graph where in China and in Japan there'll be like 46% people more trustworthy if they could actually put a face or a name together to an airline, right? So that's why in China we're coming down this route of trying to put a face towards AirAsia. And likewise in Japan, we just got to put our people out there on non-stop. Here is Kazuyuki-san. Here is Oppa. No, Oppa Gangnam is not. But we're trying to find ambassadors that we can actually attach.
But why not travel agents as ambassadors? Many people prefer the comfort of, eye-to-eye, communication. Why not travel agents? What's wrong with them?
Any travel agency? Just cost. That's it. The only way is that, as Ran said earlier, looking at that unit cost wherever we can make sure that we bring that down. GDS, travel agents, it just means a cost. We just want to pass through.
Okay, so does that mean when I next want to fly from Narita, I'm going to find AirAsia's fares consistently lower than Jetstar's because you've saved this cost?
Depends on when you book. make sure you book in advance. But
well, whenever I book, you've saved all this cost. Surely me as the passenger is going to get that back in a lower fare, or is it going to go into Tony's pocket?
No, actually, what Patrick will say is correct as well. Among the LCCs, you probably will have to make sure you maintain that level. But understand, starting up a new airline means new aircraft, new charges, long-term contracts. And suddenly now I've got a cost base about this high. I've got to reap that back very quick, or I won't be around for the next 5 years. So no, it doesn't go into Tony's pocket, it doesn't go into mine either. It just goes back into the airline, it just keeps piling up.
Okay. Patrick?
Well, we never refuse a booking from a travel agent. They're welcome to book, but there's no commission. And that's the fundamental, right? So we have to create the word of mouth. We have to create the promotion. We've got to get that talking that's going on in that place that you said which would create the situation that we're doing. Call center is critical. I was one that said, Ryanair doesn't have a call center. Why would we have a call center? But I was persuaded, back to what we said, mobile communication, people need face, people need to talk. But equally, the mandate for the call center that wants you to be out of business in 3 years. We have to have that interpersonal communication, but that can be done through a call center, and it's certainly been done very effectively. 95% of the bookings today are done on the web, probably by individuals. But some of them are coming into the travel agents, but frankly, the travel agent, just as they do in Europe, if you book on a Ryanair, you pay more. Because travel.
Now let me ask, we are, I think, coming to the end, but let me ask about fleet plans for the minute. I know it's again a little bit early days, but certainly directionally, if I take the three airlines together, in the next, I believe in the next 5 years, you're probably going to be putting something like 80 aircraft into the market. Okay, so that's a lot of metal. That's a lot of metal, and this obviously sits behind some of that low-cost penetration that CAPA had advised. Are you going to run out of markets? Do you know where those planes are going to go? I mean, obviously, international markets are a focus now, but there's not too many accessible international destinations that are suitable for an A320. And if you're trying to get to sort of Bangkok or Singapore, you might be running short, you know, or load limited. So where are you going to put all these planes? Where are we going to see them go directionally? Zaman?
We'll take out half the seats in the plane, put in fuel tanks, and then we can fly 9 hours. On an A320. Don't tell Airbus. Oh, Airbus is here as well. For the next 5 years, we think we can put in about maybe 30 to 40 planes easily.
But the same, and I think Suzuki would say the same, and so will Peach. So that's 120 planes. Wow. Where are you going to be flying? All just on the trunk routes?
Well, for Peach, we haven't announced order. We have 10 aircraft. That's all we have ordered. We want to see, try it and work, see what we're working. We did this week. We had a board meeting and we've approved the next process to bring in the next tranches beyond 2014 and that. But that's all we're doing. It's step by step. But critically, don't think that we're just being a Kansai-based operator. Neighbours want to be Narita. We're going to have other bases, and we're going to be operating and spreading.
But Peach has talked about additional bases, and I know you can't talk about specifics, but you know, at some point you're going to be becoming more, you know, in direct competition with these guys. You're going to. All of you is going to go off to Okinawa at some point. Somebody's going to, you know, that's got to be an obvious base choice. Sapporo.
Correct. So we'll do that. We start Okinawa October 18th, 2 flights a day.
Yeah.
And if it works and if it develops, that will be a base, and we fly from Okinawa to Seoul or Taipei or wherever it might be. But it won't all be in Kansai. In other words, we're going to put it overload on one base, spread it around.
And Suzuki-san, if I might just ask you the same question in a slightly different way, and you know, clearly the next 5 years, part of the success of Jetstar is going to be how do you intelligently deploy those aircraft in a way that gives good coverage, but perhaps, you know, doesn't mean you're head-to-head with the other guys. How are you going to do that? Give us some insight on how you do that.
Well, we have a very firm schedule of getting 24 aircraft, Airbus 320s, delivered by the middle of 2014. So that's almost an aircraft every month. So we do have very, very ambitious plans. We start our international operations in March. Look, there's a lot of latent demand at the right price. It is all about price. In the first day, I think Peter talked about people going for shopping trips in Korea. Lifestyles are going to change. And, you know, if the price is right, people will go for day trips, not just to Sapporo, but to, you know, Incheon or whatever. So that's what we're really kind of targeting in terms of our destinations. We're also trying to be very intelligent in terms of how we sync up with our sister airlines, Jetstar Asia, Jetstar Australia, and from next year, Jetstar Hong Kong. Increasing frequency on key routes, even if it's competing with other airlines or even within our group, I think is not necessarily a core idea, because frequency engenders trust. I am much more likely to book with an airline that has 3 flights a day to destination than 3 flights a week, simply because, you know, if anything happens, I have the choice. Yeah. So, you know, we're working on that basis. We are confident that we will continue to get the types of load factors that we expect. Jetstar, as a group in the past 8 years, have consistently been able to hit around 80% mark on, you know, across all their routes.
Now, link-ups, let me just dive into that a little bit. I mean, obviously you can get Jetstar points, which I think you can convert to the Qantas frequent flyer program.
At the moment, we don't do that.
You don't do that. Are you going to do that? I mean, that's a competitive advantage.
I can't talk about that.
Can't talk about that? What about JAL? I mean,
Talk about that definitively just yet?
well, let me keep trying, because clearly there's an opportunity, and maybe Peach has thought about this, getting access to the ANA frequent flyer database. Wow.
We won't.
Really?
No. Not our market. Frequent flyers are a particular breed of traveller that are not going to be persuaded by points and miles. Price is going to get
But
cost.
there's lots of frequent flyers, and the ANA and JAL, who are just the man and woman in the street, are certainly your market.
It's a cost. We don't need the cost. We'd rather be reflected in a low price. And that's the key to it.
Zaman, the frequent, the big frequent flyer scheme, is that available to the AirAsia Japan traveller?
Yes, big will be available soon. But I was just going to build on what you were trying to say earlier. The thing is that, 3 LCCs, 4 LCCs, 5 LCCs in Japan in the future just have one aim: make LCC travel sexier than any other form available. Make it affordable, make it nice. There's also a very large portion of connectivity into Japan of foreign travelers wanting to go to Japan, right? What stops an ASEAN traveler going to Japan for 4 days for a holiday? They'll think expensive hotels, expensive travel. Do this on LCC. We're not only talking about growing a local Japanese market who wants to travel. What about inbound traffic into Japan? I'm talking about probably, would I find Vietnamese now, coming in large groups to Japan for holidays? Indonesians, would I be seeing that very soon? That is what this industry needs to enable, and likewise, and the government of Japan needs to recognize it and help LCCs grow. That's my point.
Let's finish one last question. Anybody got a burning question? Gentleman there.
So yeah, given your very aggressive fleet expansion plan in the coming years, could you share with us how you plan your routes together with your parent companies?
I've already spoken about, we do have a regular flying committee with JAL, which replicates or is modelled on the flying committees that Qantas and Jetstar have. They're not all hunky-dory, peaceful, amicable affairs, but they do allow us to nut out what are going to be win-win situations, good for the market, good for the customer, and also good for the balance sheets of both the parents. And that will include things like route profitability, who can serve it more effectively, how seamlessly we can connect, and so on.
Specifically, more not on the Qantas side, but more on the JAL side.
We are replicating the same model with JAL. So we have regular planning committees.
So in terms of overlapping in 5 years' time.
So we will discuss overlapping routes and see whether that is strategically a good thing. And sometimes overlapping routes are a good thing, to give customers the choice. JAL will target the premium business class passengers, and we will go in at the very, very cost sensitive, even for the same routes, and then really try and squeeze the competition. So sometimes that works very, very well. And at other times, JAL might say, hey, we'd rather spend our money, our CAPEX on entering another market. Maybe, Jetstar, you can keep the kind of interest and flow and feeding into the rest of our network by taking over some routes. So those are, I can't be more specific than that, but those are the types of discussions that would typically happen.
Any other comments?
There's no discussions between Peach and ANA at all. We're free to do what we want as we see it's profitable to do, and that's the driving force.
Same for us. We're quite independent. So, and I agree with the overlapping one, because it only just creates healthy competition, and so we'll see whether we get on parent later on saying don't do that. Let's see.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Peter. Got a mic somewhere, please?
Thank you very much. Just well, you're the boss, but one last question if I could. These deals, as in each case, have been done from the top down, basically, and I wonder, in those circumstances, there are two other, I guess, reactionary forces at play, even though the senior executives might be in agreement. One is the middle management, who may feel threatened by what's going on. I'm talking about all Nippon and JAL, of course. The middle management who may well feel threatened by these new incumbents, these new entrants who are going to challenge perhaps my future. And the other one more specifically is the unions. What sort of responses are we seeing from the unions? Is there any unrest on their behalf?
Excellent points. Suzuki-san?
I think, you know, the uncertainty and fear, it's a real fact of life. However, I think, you know, the message that we put out is that JAL, without having an interest in an LCC like ourselves, Jetstar Japan, is quickly going to become, you know, irrelevant. So I think they have to use us in the best possible way, whether it's in a value proposition to the customer or you know, sort of us both learning from each other to try and make JAL's business going forward sustainable and help us to make sure that we're in here for the long haul as well. Now, JAL has a specific issue, which is that it went bankrupt. And so the union problems are not specifically directed against Jetstar. It's more directed against the downsizing and rationalization that went on as part of the bankruptcy proceedings. But we're coming out of that now, so I do feel that there's generally within JAL a much more positive atmosphere. There's a lot of noise at the political level saying, you know, JAL's a bankrupt company, they shouldn't be allowed to do international routes or new routes domestically or invest in Jetstar. But, you know, that's all bunkum. I mean, if JAL wants to become profitable and start growing again as the flag carrier, they have to do all of these things.
Patrick, you're advising ANA as well. Some insights into how they're handling the union issue?
The obvious one in the first instance in setting up a peach was to make sure they didn't have a majority shareholder, so that no union could dictate that we have to have same terms of reference or same conditions. So that was the starting point. But more fundamentally, within Peach, there's a different culture that's being created. Right? We do have a whole different approach to the way compensation is done and everything else. And we're bringing in inherited from Europe again. Let's take the example of pilots. Pilots get the same pay as they get in any other organization. But the more they fly, the more they get paid. So they're incentivized to pay more. The cabin crew get a commission on sales is derived to them. Bonuses are guaranteed if we make profit. It's directly related to profit. Culture is created by innovation, by suggestions, by meetings. We now have the Irish pub every 1 or 2 months where we all get together.
I also think in this case, it's often not understood that if we take pilots at low-cost airlines often earn more than in flag carriers. Not always, but often. Ryanair pilots. I mean, but not in basic pay. It's in performance-related or productivity-related pay. So there's LCCs achieve a much better alignment of pilot, shall we say, just take pilot interest to a business interest and reward hard work, which I think is an important point, but I know all these airlines work very hard to achieve it.
But pilots don't always necessarily think very logically, except when they're flying aeroplanes.
That's true. Any other questions or points? Okay, we'll finish it there. And thanks. I thought there was a lot of very interesting inputs there from a very august panel. We thank you for your time and taking some quite obnoxious questions at time. I apologise for that. Thank you very much indeed.